Uh, all right. So, first, whenever I ask a question, if you could just repeat the question in your answer, that would be
Okay.
great. So the first question is your name, what your job was at Intel, and what you kind of did at Intel.
Okay. My name is Jordan Plawner. I most recently was Intel's Global Director of AI Product Management and Strategy. Essentially, I built AI product teams, people who would build roadmaps, plan our roadmaps, what technology we needed, what products we were going to launch over time, usually over a 5-year period. I would run the execution, team that were a bunch of program managers that would manage our execution, organize it, and then also led sort of a go-to-market team that was across Intel that would do everything from marketing to sales to product positioning, and then obviously work with customers and partners to bring our products to market.
Awesome. What is your definition of an LLM or large language model?
A definition of a large language model, you can talk about various levels of definitions. There's the actual core technology. And one of the things about large language models that make them so innovative compared to AI models that came previously, which are still in use. I mean, most people do not use large language models today because um, they're still relatively new, relatively expensive, and they're also not appropriate for a lot of more mature use cases around, say, vision, where you would never use a large language model for vision. But one of the key aspects of the technology is something called transformers, which allows these AI models to quote unquote remember. Right. So they're not just on the moment saying, oh, this is, Will's face. They're actually able to have a conversation with you using something called embeddings, which allows it to kind of keep track of a conversation and context, which is really a pretty major breakthrough for AI systems. So that's obviously one kind of explanation of what a large language model is. Um, but a more general definition of a large language model or a generative AI model, which is part of probably the kind of the overall category, is something that a user can interface with natural language, right? Just the way humans speak or the way we write. And that kind of interaction with a model or an AI system is really also a major breakthrough in terms of making AI kind of present in the consciousness of the public. Before this, you couldn't really interact with an AI system. It was just a tool, say, around image recognition, facial recognition, object recognition, which was, relatively a simple, passive kind of capability. But to be able to prompt an AI system or a computer system with natural language is an absolute major breakthrough, even to the point where people who write code can actually now just through natural language of either text or words in any language, hundreds of languages, can actually just tell a computer system to write code. Again, a major breakthrough. So I think those are two ways of thinking about large language models. One is what is the core technology of transformers, and then also what is this kind of breakthrough that's made AI kind of enter the public consciousness, starting with ChatGPT, obviously, which was the real major breakthrough where suddenly hundreds of millions of people were able to chat with an AI system for the first time.
Wow, it's incredible. I read in 2017, Intel launched its Responsible AI program. What is the mission of this program and why was it put in place?
So Intel is a components vendor. We're not like an end customer, or consumer product company, right? So say, for example, Dell or HPE would build computers. We don't build computers. We build the chips that go inside computers. So really, in a lot of ways, the chips are just kind of this foundational component. So since we're not involved in the final product, we have to sort of take a stand on how we do and do not want our components to be used, right? And really, in the end, we sell components and we don't know how they're going to be used. But we wanted to make sure that our staff, directly was not involved in any what we would call unethical uses of our product. Okay. Now, it doesn't stop someone in the marketplace from getting a hold of our CPUs, for example, or our GPUs from some distributor and using them in some way. But especially back in 2017, the primary use case for AI was really vision, especially vision on the edge. And so that got into lots of issues of surveillance, especially in certain countries. So we really wanted to step back from, from the surveillance sort of state and make sure that we knew how, if we knew our chips were being used in an unethical way, that we just would not be involved, right? I think that was kind of just the basic concept of just having an ethical line. But I also wouldn't say that it means, I mean, that no chip is used in an unethical way that Intel makes. There's just no way we can stop that because we're not we're just an ingredient company and our ingredients are found all over the world.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, what in the media
I
recently?
should say one. Sorry. I should say one more thing. Another aspect of ethical AI is really around privacy. Right. So Intel ensures that for the actual projects we run, that we don't collect personal identification or identifying information unless we absolutely need to for our program. And that if we do, we get people's opt-in for that. So we should not be collecting data around people if we don't need to. But there could be examples of if you're trying to build software stack that's doing facial recognition, well, you have to test it with real faces and the names of those people to see if your systems are accurate, right? So but those people have to opt into those programs. And then, of course, we have to have a retention policy. Well, why are we keeping this information if we don't need it anymore? So let's get rid of the information. Let's delete it. So a lot of ethical behaviors really are also around personal identification. And I think just this last week, we've seen some really startling, admissions by Facebook and Netflix around, sharing personal information in ways that I think the users would have never thought their personal information would be shared, right? And often it's not that a company has your personal information. I mean, we give up our personal information all the time to companies. We just would expect them not to use it in sort of indirect ways, like we've seen this last week.
Wow. I want to talk a little bit more about the ethics specifically. I feel like in the media, the average person is kind of scared of AI. And so I'm wondering, why do you think people are scared and should they be scared?
Yeah, yeah, there are. Oh, so should people be scared of AI? Should the public should be scared of AI? I'll talk about this in a few different levels. One, I don't believe we need to go to the level of science fiction to have a legitimate fear of AI. So if you think about, say, 2001, which is the often used example, but there's been many new movies in the last 5 or 10 years that show AI out of control, AI taking over. But AI is not conscious. AI itself is not taking over. It's simply a tool that people can use. And we know how people abuse technology today, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's creating false information, whether it's trying to influence elections. And AI can do two things really well. It can create even more convincing fake data, whether it's image or text, right? And it can distribute that data at a much faster speed than, say, a kind of a bot farm can. You could actually just prompt a system. If you give an AI system access to 100 computers and you just told the AI system to use those 100 computers to spread false information of a certain context, the AI system can run the whole thing by itself based on simple prompts, you know, and it can evolve those messages. So it could do it for weeks where every week or every day it's actually changing the message a little bit, adding new details, and seem very convincing. So I don't think we need to imagine a computer system becoming conscious and taking over the world and be afraid of that. I think we need to be afraid of exactly the kinds of things we're seeing in the world right now, how people abuse technology and how AI can just make that easier. And of course, making false videos that look really convincing around, Obama or Biden doing certain things, right? Or, even, and then there's also more susceptible countries in the world. I mean, I think in some sense, America is probably and Europeans are more sophisticated and sort of understanding this, but in countries where they're not as digital first, they can be really highly manipulated because they don't have as much familiarity with how systems propaganda the way we can be, though we're obviously highly manipulative as well. I think the other thing people should be afraid of or concerned with, it's legitimate, is job displacement. And I think it's not going to happen as fast as people think, but then it'll happen really quickly. This is the old saying is that, it took 20 years and then it happened overnight, right? Because people will only see the impact when it happens, and it'll be sudden and fast, but it won't be right away. And that's just because I don't think AI is as easy to use and as sophisticated as people think. And it's mostly doing new things. It's not really replacing people just yet. But I think it will. And I think the difference between this and other aspects of, say, the Industrial Revolution, where jobs have been displaced, there used to be candle makers, there used to be horseback riders, right? But they were displaced over time, sometimes over decades. And we always had the image of the 55-year-old coal miner who was put out of work. And you're like, okay, well, he's 55 and he'll, job retraining is probably challenging at that age. But now imagine 30-year-olds put out of work. That the thing they studied just 10 years earlier, speaking of people who are in film school, that the things people studied 10 years earlier now become automated before they even get into the job force. And I think that's pretty scary to see the speed at which that might happen. So I think those are the two things people should be concerned about. Of course, with any technology, there's also going to be the upside, better diagnosis, faster drug discovery, you know, um, um, you know, things that help automate people's lives, personal assistance. So I do think there's obviously, like with any technology, more upside than downside.
Do you think that this job replacement will happen anywhere in the entertainment industry, specifically animation?
I think it will, and I think it'll be along the lines of what we've sort of seen so far, in the sense that AI, um, there's two, AI is a paradox in that people think of AI as consolidating power. And that's true in terms of how complicated the technology is to use, how expensive it is to implement accurately and well. But it's also paradoxically enabling sort of individuals, right? So, you can imagine a world where there are tools online, some free, some for pay, or for subscription, where any individual can go create an animated video based on their prompts, based on a script they write, use an AI system to write a script and then feed that script into a prompt. So in some sense, you're actually empowering the individual to do more, right? In a way. And you can sort of look at that as like TikTok and YouTube now and all, how people just make videos, right? Now there's still an industry of people making TV shows and movies, so these things coexist, right? The whole kind of, Instagram, TikTok world of making your own videos hasn't obsoleted movies, right? But definitely it's taken eyeballs away from movies and TVs, right? There's more time spent on TikTok than people going to the movies, right? So I think this is going to accelerate and exacerbate that. I think the other thing, and this is probably one of my, so I'm a person who loves music, loves movies and films, so and art. So my own personal fear is that um, we will get cultural obsolescence. That we've seen this already with music, right? Music is now basically free. And it's really hard for bands, musicians to make money anymore because the digitization is equivalent to the commoditization, right? Once you go from a CD or vinyl, that's a physical substance, to a digital file, no one wants to pay for it, right? We were more willing to pay for plastic than we are for the digital file. And obviously they're easy to share and all these things, right? So I do feel like that AI is going to also do that to almost all culture. It's going to make it commoditized, and then people don't want to pay for it. And I think one of the biggest impacts will be that if you're not the best in your field, you're really vulnerable. Because I think AI systems will do a pretty good job at mediocrity. So whether it's music, books, art. If you love Picasso, why buy a new artist painting when you can just, feed a 50 Picasso pictures into a system and say, create me a new Picasso. And then you could send away to some, other country where they'll paint it for you for $100 and send it to you in the mail. And now you have your own Picasso. But I think all those things will be really mediocre.
Mhm.
Um, and actually, if you think about it, most TV is mediocre, most animation is mediocre, most music is mediocre, right? Most books are mediocre. I work in my high tech field. I work with a lot of marketing people. Most of the marketing people I work with are mediocre, and a few are really amazing. And I've already started using Chat GPT, and I go, well, this is as good as a mediocre marketing person. whatever it's produced for me. So why would I pay a mediocre marketing person to do something that ChatGPT can do for free? Right. So I do think if I think about the animation field, it's like if you're not great, who's going to pay for mediocre anymore? Right. And that's really hard because not everyone can be great. And there's nothing wrong with not being great. And I'm sure you have peers and colleagues, and you're like, yeah, they'll probably do okay in the industry, but they're not going to be, you know, someone I'm going to follow or look up to. But now I worry about those jobs first. I think people will always pay for originality, for creativity. I think there's always going to be a market for that. But I wonder what happens into the middle. I think that gets hollowed out pretty in the next 10 years.
So, do you think that the big industries, or the big animation industries, my question is,
Yeah.
why would big animation studios choose to switch from human animators to an AI animator?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great question, and there's obviously no one answer because there's different studios that focus on different parts of the market. I mean, you can certainly see how they would use AI to automate things, right? One of the things that you can do with AI today that's relatively, useful is do a first draft of something. So why not let AI do the first draft, do the storyboarding, produce the script, and then hire and use your best people to improve that, right? So I do think it starts off as being an assistant. Now that will obviously impact the mediocre people, and the young people who need to learn on the job, and you learn on the job by doing the grunt work, right? And so I think they're going to automate a lot of the grunt work to save money potentially, but I think it actually will also be more productive. I mean, if you think about it, AI systems can work 24/7. They can work, worldwide. I mean, there are some things that are truly better in terms of the experience of using an AI system. Um, I think the biggest threat, like I said before, again, some studios might just want to produce mediocre content and just use AI to just spit it out all day long, right? You can imagine a situation like Disney. Like, I'm always like surprised when there's a big Disney movie, and I might just be walking through an aisle. Not less so now. I mean, it's obviously because things have moved all online. But you walk through the aisle and you realize, oh, Disney has like spit out all these DVD straight to DVD movies based on something, a big movie, and then they produced all these TV shows based off of it, right? That don't even get released, but the kids know about them, right? And I'm like, yeah, well, why wouldn't you have your best people produce the animated movie, and then when it's a hit, then you just use AI to spit out a bunch of like low quality content for 6-year-olds, So I could see it be used like that. But I do think, when this all shakes out, it'll probably be something like there'll be companies that are disruptive that put AI tools in everyone's hands to make their own animated movie or short. And then the studios probably can't compete with that in a way. So then the studios will need to continue to use real people to do things that are really, really creative, right? Um, but that might result in those studios like a Disney doing less content because sort of the bottom of the market or the middle of the market is taken up by people who just like, I mean, Ephraim loves, not, it's not Phineas. What's the show, God, with the old man and his grandson who, the animated show. I'm spacing on it for a moment. I don't know. You follow animation that,
I'm
I don't know
not
if you,
too big in animation.
oh, your documentary. That's right. Yeah. Anyway, there's a show that Ephraim loves, and it's like, and they just produce
Oh, Rick and
episodes.
Morty?
Rick and Morty, yeah. They produce episodes really, really slowly. And I'm sure like everyone has their own Rick and Morty ideal script. This is such a random show with all these kinds of cultural callbacks. And I'm like, like in the future, people are just going to want to make their own Rick and Morty episodes, you know? So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. My last question is, what advice would you give to a college student who's pursuing animation?
Mhm. Um, Undoubtedly, the advice I would give to a college student in, say, the entertainment field, the animation field, is no different than I give advice to any other young person, which I do occasionally, which is don't be the person displaced by AI, be the person who uses AI, right? And AI will move in phases. So in the current time period, AI is mostly especially to highly skilled labor, is mostly an assistant. So get familiar with the tools, start using them, and see how they can make you more productive, right? Maybe take some AI classes. There's tons of free AI classes online just to get a sense of how these tools work, and just always stay on top of it, right? And again, this has never not been the case in the last 30 years with kind of technology, um, but it's moving faster and faster, right? And so I think that's one piece of advice is be the person who uses the technology when you're going for job interviews. You know, uh, they're going to want to know how are you going to use AI to make you more productive, to produce content faster. And you need to be able to explain this is how I've already been using AI. These are the tools I'm familiar with. Ask what tools the employer uses. Because maybe they have their own homegrown tools, maybe they use a paid version of the tool you're using. Engage in conversations about AI is just part of the workflow. So I think don't think of AI as something separate. Think of AI as part of a workflow, the way a computer is, or PowerPoint is, or Excel is, depending on your job, right? I'm obviously there's lots of programs for video editing, which is part of your workflow, right? And actually, most of the video editing programs will start using AI as part of their workflow, right? So it's not a standalone thing. It actually is part of a workflow over time. And number two, to call back to what I said before, I mean, don't be mediocre, right? Don't be mediocre. And you'll see if you say work with ChatGPT just as an example, or you use some of these image generation programs to make photorealistic photographs or to make a short animation clip, you'll see they're not that great, right? They're not that realistic. Um, but it sets a bar or sets a floor, right? I have to be better than this, whether it's photography or documentary film or animation. I have to be better than this. So, and that bar is going to keep moving. So it's a world that I am actually glad I am as excited as I am by the technology, just from a pure technologist standpoint. I'm actually glad I'm not 20 right now. So because it's going to be a hard world to navigate. So I don't know. That's probably not a hopeful thing to say, but is it a fear? I don't know if I'm being fearful, but it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to navigate this world. But the only way you can is by being conscious and open and yeah, don't be mediocre and use AI. Don't be disrupted by it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this interview. You've been very, very helpful. I got everything that I needed. And
Okay, well, I'm glad I could help you. What year are you?
I'm a sophomore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Ephraim and I are really good friends.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
you guys are very similar. I see the resemblance.
Yes, I think as he's gotten older, he and I have gotten very similar. That's probably true. But okay, well, best of luck, and let Ephraim know how it goes. And so I'd love to hear. Are you making an audio? I know he's done some audio stuff. And are you doing a visual documentary? What are you doing?
I'm basically producing a news piece with AI. So, and then I'm putting the interviews over it. And so I'm using a AI video software and creating a video. And I'm writing a script
Hmm.
and threading it through the video AI to tell the
Hmm.
story and then
Hmm.
cut that with interviews.
Right, right. But I think the other thing, I'll just say one more thing. The other thing that as an old person is something that is a little bit, it's an observation is of course every generation gets used to something different or new. Like I remember a time when people talked about watching movies on phones, right? And everyone said there's no way would people this I was in a world where screens got bigger and bigger, right? Big TVs, flat screens, right? The TV in your living room could never be big enough. That's the world I grew up in, right? As well as obviously movie theaters. And when people said people will watch a full-length Hollywood movie on your phone or a tablet for that matter, everyone said that's crazy. And now that's what people do all the time. Right? My kids will sit on the couch in the living room with the TV off in front of them, watching a movie on Netflix on their phone that they could put on the TV right in front of them. So I guess another thing to think about is what are young people What are they going to put up with? Meaning, what will they accept? Maybe they will accept, you know, content that is not too realistic, animation that's not that great, movies that don't quite look real, but they're all AI generated. So, I think there's both a moving target of what the technology is doing, but there's also a moving target of what the next generation accepts as good enough, whether it's screen size or the ideas of privacy, which have shifted dramatically, right? People have given up privacy, um, ideas around personal space. So I think that's like the wild card is you have these two moving pieces, right? AI and the culture, and both are moving at all this, and I guess they're probably interacting with each other. And so I guess culture changes as well. So there's a lot of unknowns about um, what will people just simply accept from AI, and maybe people one day will say, why am I paying for movies? Movies should all be free too, just like the way music is free now. So I think it's a world we'll have to see what happens. All right.
Well, thank you so much again.
All right. Take care, Will.
Take care.